2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Fargo, Canada. Oops, sorry.
Quite.
With an interesting set of films. But I figured I'd take you all to the birthday boy, and have you guys figure out from him what movie we are going to be discussing this week.
Yes, it is a mystery, a homespun murder mystery, if I do recall the tagline. We are looking at the 19. Oh, hey Mo. We are looking. You're just in time. We are looking at the 1996 classic comedy thriller from the brothers Coen, Fargo, which is it's an okay description on IMDb. They call it Jerry Lundegaard's inept crime falls apart due to his and his henchman's bungling and the persistent police work of the quite pregnant Marge Gunderson. This was a film that came out in the wake of what may well be the most unmitigated disaster in the Coens' career, the Hudsucker Proxy, which was actually an excellent film, but it just did not do them any favors. It did kind of tank.
Kids.
Exactly, for kids. But Fargo kind of wowed everybody and got a ton of Oscar love, including 2 wins. Actress in a leading role for Frances McDormand and writing original screenplay for the Coens. Nominated for picture, supporting actor for William H. Macy, director cinematography, and this may have been the first Oscar nod for the fictional construct Roderick Jaynes, who actually is the brothers Coen. Jaynes has been nominated for several Oscars despite not existing. It's great, but which actually fits perfectly with the theme for tonight, which is, in a sense, the blurred lines between reality and fiction. Is a pretty solid theme for what we're going with tonight with this one and Kumiko the Treasure Hunter, our next film. So I'm going to go ahead and do the quick roundabout and see what everyone's first impressions are. And I will start on the screen I'm looking at. I'll go clockwise. So, Forrest, how about you? What's your experience with Fargo?
Fargo, okay. So this is probably the first time I've watched it in about a decade. And the last time I watched it a decade ago was actually the first time I watched it. But the Coen Brothers, I think they are one of the directors. Those directors that I can't think of a single bad movie they've ever done. Even their lesser movies are still very good, and this is definitely I would say maybe at or the top. Like as far as their best, this is probably at the best or at near best. And I think it's a crime, and I think it's a crime in of itself that it got robbed for best. It got robbed for best picture. To the English Patient. What?
Yeah, I mean, English Patient's a good film, but it doesn't have near the rewatch value.
No, definitely not. It deserved all the praise. I think it definitely deserved all the praise it got. Great cast, phenomenal cast and performances all around from Frances McDormand, William H. Macy, Steve Buscemi. It's such a great. It's such a I was too young to see it when it came out, but having watched it now 2.5 times, it's a classic in every sense. It's definitely a classic in every sense of the word. I can't put it any other way.
All right. But do you, Dane?
I think he froze.
You there, Dane?
He froze like he's in the like the tundras of Minnesota.
But it appears so.
Don't you know?
So I guess I'll go ahead and go to you, Mo, and then Dane, when you unfreeze, we'll let you go.
Fargo is definitely like I don't remember what order I saw it in. There was a point in time where someone was like, I think Oh Brother Where Art Thou might have been the first Coen movie I actually saw.
Mm-hmm.
But before like giving a shit who directed it or anything, you know what I mean?
Right.
At some point,
Same.
my buddy Keegan, same dude who turned me on to most of the samurai stuff, like pretty much insisted that I start watching the Coen stuff. So I went ahead and did that, you know, and Fargo was one of those movies. I enjoy it, you know, it's got that small town, you know, like vibe to it with the cops and everything. And I'm always a fan of like a bungled criminal plot, you know. It's just fun to watch that unravel from every scene in this movie, not just one or two, you know. Great cast. I think this is probably definitely the movie that made me just love Frances McDormand, and now I can watch her in anything, and I'm always stoked about it. So shouts out to that 3 Billboards, I think it was. That was a good one.
Oh, yeah.
Missouri.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great one. But yeah, it rules, man. And it doesn't have a happy ending, which I love. You know, I always like a movie that just takes you right there, and then it just says, "Yeah, no, this is pretty much just fucked up." So there.
Well,
it is.
it does and it doesn't. It depends on how you look at it. You know, not happy for everyone.
Norm got his mallard on that friggin' stamp. That's all I care about.
Well, it does and it doesn't. It depends on how you look at it. Yeah, not happy for everyone.
Norm got his mallard on that friggin' stamp. That's all I care about.
Well, it does and it
It's a strange thing that's happening here.
Yeah, not happy for everyone.
Norm got his mallard on that friggin' stamp. That's all I care about.
Well, it does and it
It's a
doesn't.
strange thing that's happening
Yeah, not happy for everyone. Is anyone else hearing a continual audio loop?
Yeah, we're stuck in some type of purgatory, dude.
Yeah, what happened?
Oh, hold on.
Somebody have their
Is
YouTube
anyone-
up?
I got it.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, there we go.
That happened with Roger last night. so-
That was weird. But we didn't hear it last night. That was all in his world.
Well, he had headphones on.
Oh, okay.
So it was all coming to him.
Okay. So was that everything, Mo, or you?
That's all I got right now.
All right. Dane, have you returned to us? Huh.
I'm not sure.
I kind of heard him a little bit.
Yeah, I heard bits and pieces, but I don't know if that was a delayed feed or.
All right.
Maybe,
All right. Well, I guess you can go, Dave.
Okay. I'm no longer a stranger to the Coen brothers, thanks
Good.
to you. But in high school, I know that "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" was a fan favorite of my music class, and I just never got to go and see it. But we were singing songs from it, so I guess whatever. But it was thanks to you that I saw the first one that I saw was "Raised in Arizona," and then we saw "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," and then you had me see, what was it, the one with John Goodman.
Dane brought up Barton Fink, yeah.
Yeah, Martin Fink.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know I've seen Blood Simple like years ago, but this is my first time actually watching Fargo.
Really?
At the time, I thought it looked stupid. I was in high school at the time, so seeing them two backwards and forwards going, oh yeah, you know, that just to me just kind of reminded me of the Yupas. And did you hear about that story about the dirty point buck? You know, and things of that nature. I mean, I mean, it was after high school when into college that I started to get into the Canadian humor, and I kind of got used to it after a few. Well, I would have to say experimental drugs. But in any case, this was my first time watching it, and God help me, I got into the series as well last night. So I'm like 6 episodes in on the series, and oh my God, is it so different than the movie? But I'm
afraid you have one up on me for that.
I really liked this movie. I don't know why. It had an odd sense of humor. It was so weird, and it just went in places that kind of like, gave my heart some twinges. So it was cool. I mean, I wanted to see where it would take me, and I kind of fell in love with William H. Macy for a moment. So it was interesting, and I thought the characters that were brought into it were interesting. And I recognized some characters from it that are from later series. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah, this film is filled to the gills with character actors who are either early in their careers or were kind of in breakout roles. Like when this came out, William H. Macy had been on a couple seasons of ER, I believe. Buscemi had done some work with the Coens, but this was his first major role with them. John Carroll Lynch was pretty much an unknown. McDormand was known mainly for her work with the Coens, but she'd had a couple other roles. So there were a lot of people that kind of springboarded from this into bigger and better things. I think this was Peter Stormare's first American role, although he was already apparently a national hero in Sweden when this came out. I've heard that he is like almost a god there from according to a lot of people. But anyway, so and it was also the third collaboration between the Coens and Roger Deakins. Arguably, the film that really helped solidify them as a unstoppable team. But anyway, so Dane. Your computer working?
Or not.
Oh man!
There
you go.
What I was trying to say before my internet cut out there and was that not working?
I think you're still cutting out.
Found a bit of a
Sorry, my internet here is up. Don't know why. Anyway, well, what I was trying to say there was I was in St. Paul, Minnesota back in '96 when this film came out. Of course, I was only 4 years old. They were fans of the Coen Brothers, and so let's just expose them relatively early. I was like, it was my watching, and grew to watch a lot since then. I think this film it certainly entered the and as far as their I've seen it's one's more personal favorites. This one definitely has a lot of theme in common with some of the other work.
You're still coming and going.
Dude, are you in this? You could that taking place in this kind of world where there's a lot of might I?
Someone's putting his modem through the wood chipper.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I don't know.
That's a bummer. I'm sorry, Dan.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Well, I heard that. But yeah, you're coming and going. Like we'll hear a couple of sentences and then it chips out, and then yeah.
So,
But anyways, let's not have radio silence. So let's go to Brandon.
Yeah, sorry about that.
well, I did see this at one point in time in my life. Actually, I had not had any familiarity with the Coen brothers whatsoever until a certain individual who shall not be named introduced me to them. And mainly through a brother, Where Art Thou? And since then, I've had kind of a love-hate relationship with the Coens. I've really liked some of their films, and I've really detested others of their films. So it's kind of, hey, the good is really good. So I'm not going to lie on that. And this is one of those good ones. I don't remember whether I saw Fargo earlier than the point that I first actually remember seeing it. But I remember getting the Coen Brothers collection when I was at Plan 9, which they kind of shrunk it now, but it used to be a pretty cool place to find find some rare music or other items, sometimes movies that you wouldn't find anywhere else. And this one, I was like, I know that name. Somebody talked about that before. I'm sure that these will probably be good films. And so I got to watch quite a few of them, and it's a good collection. I think Jake has it as well.
Oh, and, yeah, that's what this particular volume comes from. That nice little thin pack.
And I was very impressed with Fargo. I enjoyed it. I liked that. I liked the interactions, loved the acting, and for the most part, it was an enjoyable ride, and actually more enjoyable the second time around. I'm sure that's probably going to be the case for all of these, except for maybe Barton Fink, which I liked straight out of the box. The Hudsucker Proxy, I think I had to get separately, or is that in that set?
No, the set is Fargo, Barton Fink, Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, and Miller's Crossing, I believe.
Okay, so yeah, Raising Arizona and Barton Fink were the two that I liked immediately on first watch. Fargo, I thought was okay on first watch, but I really liked it the second time I watched it through, which I believe second or third time, which is this time for the show. So I'm glad I got to revisit it. It was very enjoyable.
I feel like Raising Arizona was one of those ones that I saw a couple of times before I really knew who the Coens were, because they'd play that on TBS, I feel like, and shit sometimes.
Yeah, it was also those movies that was on TV all the time growing up.
Right.
And I'd watch whenever it came on.
It's in some ways kind of an odd duck for the Coens. Like, it's very much a Coen Brothers film, but Nick Cage is an outlier among the people who've worked with the Coens. And actually, I don't know, Brandon, if you watched it or if anyone watched the Charlie Rose interview that comes on this set where they talk with the Coens and Frances McDormand about Fargo, they talk about Raising Arizona and the experience of working with Nicolas Cage. And Joel comes out and says he has a very fertile imagination, and he's always thinking of things on set, and he's always coming up with stuff. And I had to edit him down to do the role. But he says, he's like, I'd rather someone have too many ideas that have to be pushed into the role, you know? So
Yeah, that's fair enough.
But yeah, it was interesting. But anyway, and then of course we did that. It's become kind of a theme for me to do Coen stuff on my birthday. We did Raising Arizona 2 years ago and Oh Brother last year. If we don't get around to it before next year, I'm sure there'll be, if Criterion does that release of Ballad of Buster Scruggs that we keep waiting for.
Yeah, that would be nice.
At any rate, yeah, and having done that, I've already given some idea of my experience with Fargo. But just as a quick recap, I was introduced to the Coens my first semester in college by a classmate who was a huge fan. And he, one night we were doing movies, and he's like, we're going to watch the best movie ever, which was Raising Arizona. But I think I had, at his recommendation, I think I saw Fargo within a month after that. And I've seen it, I couldn't even guess how many times. It's one of their films I've seen more often than the others. Not nearly on the level of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, but just like with Raising Arizona and The Big Lebowski, I think those are the other two I've seen quite a few times. Most of them I've seen a couple of times at least. I've seen it a lot. And for this viewing, of course, I rewatched it and watched this edition. The Coens are notoriously tight-lipped about their own stuff. Like in that Charlie Rose interview, half the stuff they said was obviously not to be taken seriously. And we'll get to some of that in a minute. And in the Minnesota Nice documentary, they offer a few little insights, but they mostly let everyone else talk. They're notoriously tight-lipped. So the audio commentary is just Roger Deakins, and he spends most of the commentary watching the movie. He probably has a grand total of 20 minutes of commentary in that commentary. So I kind of watched the movie twice to get ready for this one. But Deakins does give some interesting stuff on the cinematography. When you watch the commentary, you learned a little bit about the camera work. But yeah, this is one that I've seen many times. It has been for a long time one of my top 10 films. I actually would say it's probably one of my top 5. And second only to Oh Brother, Where Art Thou as, favorite Coen Brothers films. Actually, the fourth one that I give a 10-star rating may be next year's. I may do No Country for Old Men if we don't get to it before then. But if we do another Western month, that one's possible. But it's
well, you know what's funny? What's funny about that is that I did get the. Sorry, I was on the fritz and I had to turn off the camera, see if that would fix it. Had to jump out and get back in, but the insight that I had from this, go round was just how much of this film was. This is often called a dark comedy and a neo noir, but I noticed a lot of Western genre tropes in this. And story wise, you could have easily transplanted this into the Old West, and it would have worked.
I think that's quite possible. Yeah, the Coens do tend to blend a lot of genres, and most of their stuff is hard to fully classify as this, that, or the other, which is part of the thing. Actually, one of my touchstones for Fargo, the first time I ever thought of it in terms of being funny, I'd already seen it a couple times. And American Film Institute put out that list of the funniest films ever made, and Fargo was on the list, and I was like, huh?
No, I caught it on it right away. Like the first time I watched it, I caught it right away.
I caught it, after that, but it's a very dry humor. It's very dry.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, it was a film that was. To be fair, it was a time when the American mainstream really got exposed to this kind of accent, and it's the kind of accent that's real common with people that are kind of on the northern end of the border, kind of moving into Canada, because they're similar, found in stock. A lot of Scandinavian influence.
A lot of it's the Scandinavian, like the really like Minnesota. Of course, I've long been a big fan. Of Prairie Home Companion. This is one example where I say screw cancel culture. I still think Garrison Keillor is phenomenal wordsmith and what have you. It definitely, I am well steeped in the idea of this being a Scandinavian heavy influence on this whole thing. And actually, in the documentary, Peter Stormare talks about feeling like a pilgrim, being a Swede coming back to Minnesota in the modern times. It was kind of an interesting a concept there, but yeah, overall, this is a film that what's that? Well, I was just going to try and do a quick wrap up on the impressions part of it. This is a film that has had a long shadow for me. There have been a lot of influences. Again, this movie tonight we are pairing with a movie by the Zellner brothers called Kumiko the Treasure Hunter, which has tons of connections with this, but a lot of them in my personal mindset, and they actually reference the story that started that one. I remember distinctly riding around in the car in Salem. I actually think I remember where I was when I first heard that report of the woman who died looking for the money from Fargo, which turned out to be an urban legend, but it was a heck of a story, and it's an odd footnote to this one. And I do want to real quick give credit to Mo. I was a little bit unenthused at first about your movie choice for this month for the theme, a little bit. But then when I thought about it and we really got into it, especially after Candyman, this theme actually fits perfectly with what I wanted to do, because I wanted to do these two movies. And these are both movies that are very, very, very much Minnesotan movies. They are very much partly filmed in Minnesota. They were pretty much all filmed on location. Fargo only has one scene in Fargo, and it's otherwise Minnesota. And Kumiko starts in Tokyo and then goes to Minnesota. And also, they're both very heavily steeped in the idea of fantasy versus reality. Like Fargo opens with that line: "This is a true story. The events depicted in this film took place in Minnesota in 1987. At the request of the survivors, the names have been changed. Out of respect for the dead, the rest has been told exactly as it occurred," which was complete BS. Right. But the Coens didn't say that right away. In fact, it's an interesting anecdote where William H. Macy, 3 weeks into shooting, he went to Ethan Coen and said, "Well, tell me more about this story." And Ethan's like, "Well, it didn't happen." "Well, what? Well, tell me more." No, we made it up." "What?" And in the Charlie Rose interview, Charlie Rose directly asked them, "Was this a true story?" And Joel gives this weird non-answer where he says, "Well, the events happened, but we made up all the characters." It's weird. But so this one really blurs the line in a lot of ways. It played with the idea, and that set the stage for Kumiko to come along and be just this complete mishmash of urban legend and everything. And so thanks, Mo. It was a great lead-in for this particular.
I'm glad we got to watch these.
But anyway, Dane, hopefully you're back with us. Do you want to give us your unvarnished impression real quick?
Well, I'll try. I mean, this internet has just been driving me mad. Well, what I was trying to say there before the internet was giving me a real heck of a time what I was trying to
Darn
say is
tootin'.
that I was like, darn tootin' is right. I was like 4 or 5 years old when my family and we lived in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I'm not just doing this accent just because I like doing it. It's because I used to live there. Now, granted, I was a wee kid, but you know, yeah, I do have some authenticity with the area. And my parents were big fans of the Coen Brothers, and especially this film because they kind of lived it. They lived in the area, and so I saw this film from a fairly early age. Granted, it was on TV, and they didn't actually have to censor all that much on TV. Interestingly,
Mm.
um, and I enjoyed the film. It's been one I've seen a few times. It doesn't rank up there with my personal favorite Coen Brothers films. I like other ones better. Like I like Barton Fink. I like A Serious Man. I like True Grit more. But this does have a lot. I like, of course, The Big Lebowski, of course.
Mhm.
I could totally imagine the dude and Walter going, "Dude, are you fucking this up?" while they're trying to do
I'm
the
so-
drop off there.
I had to
But
laugh because I can just visualize doing A Serious Man, and you and Brandon would be on polar opposite ends.
yeah, we'd be on polar opposite ends and all that, and be a heck of a time. And but I enjoyed the film. I liked watching it again. It'd been a long time, and noticed a lot of parallels with the Western genre, particularly after having taken such a deep dive not too long ago, and having watched True Grit again for both versions this time. And you see a lot of overlaps there with the fact that you wouldn't have to do all that much work to make this story work in the Old West. You have a lot of, like, the opening shot there with the driving the car through the snow. It totally, and the way the music plays totally reminded me of something you might have seen in a Western. And the plot's actually not all that uncommon from a Western plot. Now, I don't recall there were a whole lot of fake kidnappings in that time, but for sure, like, a down on his luck guy goes and gets entangled with all sorts of bad ends, and they have a lot of money at stake, and there's a lot of killings and a lot of mystery and everything. Like, I could see that working in that time period. But yeah, I enjoy the film, and I can see the dark comedy aspects of it, and the fact that it was the first time that part of the country really got exposed to the country at large in terms of the culture and the vernacular. And there are a lot of lines that my family and I would quote, like, he's fleeing the interview and I'm gonna barf, and what was the other one that we said? Lot of just lines. Oh, he was just funny looking. In what way? Oh,
Right.
just in a general kind of way.
More so than most people, even.
We would say that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Turns out,
Yeah.
if I just cut off my camera, it seems to have helped a lot.
Well, that's good. That's whatever works, right? So
Yeah.
so we got there, everyone. All right. So this film, again, it's kind of, as we said, it's a dark comedy. It's based, again, they claimed it was based on a true story, but it really was not. But they still went for, Deakins talks about in the commentary, how they were going for a very naturalistic style. Like, the camera is not up close in your face for most of the scenes. It's more like laid back, like almost documentary style. I mean, it's a higher language film, a higher quality film stock than I think people usually visualize with documentary. But it was like with Hudsucker Proxy, they did a lot of weird camera stuff, and Barton Fink had some like real intense close up, kind of more tracking shots than this one had, that sort of thing, if I remember correctly. I know Hudsucker did. They definitely, this one went for more of a naturalistic, simple style. That was a word Deakins kept using over and over. Simple, simple, simple. It was like,
yeah, you just feel like kind of a fly on the wall, you know?
Right, exactly. And they tried
the naturalistic style really helps because on top of being a homespun murder mystery, don't you know? On top of that, this is definitely, in a weird kind of way, it reminds me a little bit of like what American Movie was trying to do for the Wisconsin types, as far as like it's supposed to kind of show off the place and the feel of the, why. This story could happen anywhere, but the fact that it happens here and it has this very specific flavor helps it to stand out from the rest.
Right. And actually, about the it could happen anywhere, one of the few elements of the script that they have more or less agreed, the Coens have gone back and forth on certain story elements. Like there was there was a businessman in Minnesota who had his wife killed, and they thought that was part of the story, and Joel's given different answers to that question. But apparently there was someone in Connecticut, I believe it is, that tried to dispose of a body in a wood chipper, and the Coens actually heard that and was like, yeah, we got to use that. And it is one of the more creative ends any character has met in a movie, I think.
Speaking of which, I'm a little, as much as I love Fargo, I'm a little disheartened that Forrest ain't got no love for the English Patient there. I mean, I may have to go to my local Lowe's and get me a wood chipper.
No, I will fully concur that between the two, Fargo should have won.
Yeah, definitely.
I definitely.
I want to point out that prior to Fargo, Jackie Chan's Rumble in the Bronx had a wood chipper death.
Okay.
Prior to that,
good deal.
And of course, the classic shot-on-video horror flick, Wood Chip Massacre.
Yes.
I can't say that I know that one exactly, but
it's like a fucked up version of Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, only they make the babysitter dead. That's pretty much what happened.
I bring it up because my parents, especially my mom, they were big fans of this film and The English Patient. My mom was a big English Patient fan, so I agree with you, though. I do like this more than The English Patient, but I do like The English Patient too.
Right. I was trying to. I was hoping I would find it before there was another break, but it also did set up one of my favorite rejoinders in pretty much any animated film there has ever been, which was where you had Steve Buscemi playing Randall in the classic film Monsters, Inc. And yeah, here, if I don't see a door to my station in 5 seconds, I will personally put you through the shredder. I love that they called back to Fargo's most gruesome scene in a Pixar film.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Pixar's the same company that they can't get enough introducing horror elements into the Toy Story films.
Right. Oh, geez, those dolls in Toy Story 4. Whew.
Just about every film references The Shining.
Yeah. Well, and actually, the Coens are big Kubrick fans, and you get a couple of oblique Kubrick references in this movie. The most notable one being the one where Steve Buscemi's at the celebrity room watching Jose Feliciano, and he talks about having a little of the old In and Out.
Oh man! And then when they're doing it, and that girl's like doing the fucking that North Dakota talk to him while she's banging him. That is so messed up. I don't know why that bothers me every time I watch this movie. She's fully doing like the like
You don't
like Bobby's World in there.
You don't want a little of that in your ear while you're doing the nasty?
No, not at all.
Yes, he didn't want to. What was it? Slosh? Was that what the word for hearing? I think it was sloshing or something like that.
Slooshing.
Slooshing. Yes.
I just want to point out.
Did you notice there, Bruce Campbell there on the soap opera?
Although apparently that was a legit soap opera he was in, but yeah, there was that cabin in the woods. They had that soap opera that starred Bruce Campbell. That was a nice little cameo there.
And the Coens did write the script for Sam Raimi's Crime Wave.
Right. Well, they have actually Joel's first film credit was the editor on Evil Dead. They have a long history with Sam Raimi and Ted Raimi, who's been in a few Coen films.
Well, and I think like you always hear about how they wrote Evil Dead 2 while they were sharing that apartment with the Coens, and I think Frances McDormand lived with them for a a little bit and stuff.
Yeah, well, she was in Darkman. She was in Darkman.
Well, she was. I think she was roommates with Holly Hunter, and Hunter is got a vocal cameo on Blood Simple. So yeah, there's a lot of tie-ins with those. So, but anyway, so let's get to I think we'll do a basic. We'll do more of a character synopsis, I think, but hit plot as we go. But like this film, of course, opens with one of the most epic openers ever, in my opinion. It's very simple. You get the bleak winter landscape with the car slowly appearing, but then you hear Carter Burwell's music gradually building up until you get the big reveal, with the title and the car and everything. This is one of my all-time favorite scores. It is a phenomenal score. The fact that it wasn't nominated for an Oscar for the music is a crime. The fact that Carter Burwell has only been nominated twice and never for a Coen Brothers film is a crime.
His score was real good for True Grit.
He has only been nominated for Carol and for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. But the same year he did Carol, he did a better score for Mr. Holmes. His score for Raising Arizona was phenomenal. His score for Fargo was phenomenal. In my mind, his score for Miller's Crossing is one of the best scores ever written. He should have been up for Miller's Crossing. It's just but the music, I'm just going to say straight up, I love the music. The film for me probably would not rank as high without this particular score, but it's but that opening's great. And then you go to the one scene in the whole film that's actually set in Fargo. And that's very, very briefly. And again, the Coen's weird sense of humor. It's a film about Minnesota named for a town in North Dakota. But it's so they're in there. You get Jerry Lundegaard, who's played by William H. Macy, his only Oscar nominated role, so that's also a crime. He should have been up for some other Oscars. He is a car insurance or used car salesman. I don't know. I get there eventually. A used car salesman who has some financial woes. And they never really say exactly what those are. Like, is he an inveterate gambler? Is he just made some really crappy investments?
He's taken out all those loans on cars that don't
that's what I'm saying. They don't really say why he took out all those loans.
Right.
But he is facing serious fraud allegations if he can't pay them back.
They clue that in, and you can obviously tell with his wife that she doesn't really entirely love him.
Well, I don't know. I feel like she loves him. Her father can't stand him. And actually, when we get to that, I'll just go ahead and say one of my favorite moments in the whole film is when he's talking to Wade, his father-in-law, and he's like, this could be real good for me and Gene and Scotty. And Wade just is not even looking at him, says Gene and Scotty never have to worry.
Right. And it's, I think you're onto something with him possibly having like gambling issues or things like that, because it makes it clear that they don't really trust him with money through the whole movie. Yeah.
So, and actually, I read about that too. I think that was maybe mentioned in the documentary that he is clearly an untrustworthy character. You look at him, and he looks like you're about to catch him in a lie, which 9 times out of 10 you do. But
he's a real bad liar too. I mean, that's you can think about it this way. I mean, the whole film's about how it's essentially a comedy of errors, and this is a guy who's he's trying to be the big man. He's trying to be the breadwinner. He's trying to be impressive, and his father-in-law doesn't respect him, and he's not good with money. He makes a lot of empty promises. He's not a good salesman. He's just trying to be the man. He's doing all he can.
The point I'm getting at though is that he's in a society that prizes plain honesty. Like, the people all around him are all honest, sometimes to the point of bluntness, but generally they're pleasant about it. There are different levels of that. Like most of them are putting on a friendly facade that's a little bit friendlier than it needs to be, but they're still more or less dealing straight. But this is a guy who you can tell he's not dealing straight. And that's one of the reasons why he's not gotten ahead in life. So this guy hatches this plot to get the money he needs by having his wife kidnapped and his father-in-law pay the ransom. And he hires a guy based on the word of someone who works in the shop at the car dealership, who brings along a friend. And the two of them, he's meeting them in the bar, and they have an interesting little kind of testy conversation. It's really the only time the three of them are in a room together. And they sit and have that little discussion. You find out the basic plot, the basic idea of what he's trying to do. You get introduced to the two criminals, Carl Showalter, who is played by Stu Buscemi, who plays him as a very motor-mouthed, kind of high-strung kind of guy. You get the impression that he probably wouldn't have turned dangerous under certain circumstances, but he ends up in this circumstance, especially hanging out as much as he does with Stormare, who kind of oozes this sense of, I don't give a damn about anything. And, his Gare Grims, I can't remember his full name, but Grimsrud. And chain smoking, generally unsmiling, doesn't say much at all. And they make the deal. They make the deal. They are being offered a car, a Tan Sierra. Macy calls it burnt umber, but throughout the rest of the movie, everyone else calls it tan. Slightly different, but close. He gives them the keys to the car, tells them the deal, tells them what's up. And then we move along to, we see Macy at work. We see him trying to be the car salesman, clearly not that great at it. You see his
sealant, man. That's what he does.
Which suppose
Flex Seal or whatever.
Again, you
Nobody
can take
wants
anything.
that sealant.
I know. You can take anything the Coens say about their films with a grain of salt, especially this one. But Joel Coen claims this was based on an actual experience he had with a car dealer. But so you've got that scene. And you've also got this scene, and I like this. I don't know that I ever noticed this, but when I saw it pointed out, I'm like, oh, yeah. Where you see him behind the blinds talking for the first time with the guy from the loan company that is trying to fact check the loan. Basically, he's being subject to an audit for a very sizable loan, and that's why he's doing this desperate thing. His back's up against the wall. They're calling him on this loan. He needs the money. Mm-hmm. But when you first hear him talking to this guy, Riley Diefenbach, I think his name is, you're seeing him through slatted blinds, and they did that intentionally to make it look like prison bars. And I'm like, that's kind of a fun little...
yeah, that's right.
And you've also got, you're introduced to his family life. You see his wife, who, again, I think she's fairly devoted. I never thought she was anything other than quite devoted to him and their kid, Scotty. And if you meet the father-in-law, Wade, who's played by Harv Presnell, an old veteran actor who hadn't been around for a while, but I liked him as a character. I thought he's a hard ass character.
Yeah, he's fun. I mean, I'm not complaining when that dude ventilates his parka, but it's the way he goes in on him is just classic.
Right, but it's you get that little. But this scene, you find out that Jerry has a proposition that he has put forward to Wade. And he sees it as an alternative. Like, this is what he hopes will happen. And he's hoping if the deal falls through, then his wife's kidnapping can be sort of the safety net. And he actually tries to call the job off when he thinks it's going to go forward.
He does.
Yeah. But he can't, unfortunately, because
he also jacks up the ransom without telling the kidnappers after they tell him no on the deal. So he's still just a greedy fuck either way you swing it, you know.
Well, he needs. What is it? 300. It's 320,000 he needs, right? Yeah. And he tells the kidnappers the ransom is 80,000. Yeah. He's going to keep 40 and give them 40.
And then he tells Wade $1 million, I think.
Yes, he tells Wade $1 million. So there's definitely some fuzzy math going on there, as they say.
He's trying to fudge the numbers, and he's not good at it. We've established that. Yeah.
So I look at this guy as kind of a sympathetic character and not, if you look closer at him.
Right.
I really do think that he looks at his life and he feels like he's been wronged with his life.
Right.
That this father-in-law hates him, and I'm sure in his thoughts for no real reason. And he's just looking at a way to get back at it all.
Well, there's also
part of that higher ransom, I think, is because he wanted to get back at the guy, especially with that parking lot thing he was trying to hope to do when he sees that, oh, well, y'all screwing me over.
Yeah. Well, you get the impression that very possibly he might have married for the money and then found out afterwards that wasn't going to happen. You know, there's a possibility of that.
That's a possibility, but he's too Mr. Rogers in your neighborhood kind of a guy to be that kind of only in it for the money kind of a guy.
I don't know, man.
I don't know.
He did plan to fucking have his wife kidnapped. So
yeah, this guy is clearly
he's a weasel.
He is a weasel.
Scumbag.
He's a weasel, but he's a lovable weasel.
He
that's
is
because it's William H. Macy, man. I mean, he's a scumbag. By the end, when he's like shrieking as the cops are getting him, that's one of the most satifying parts of the movie for me, because it's like, I felt bad for him up until a certain point, but now fuck this dude.
Yeah, like and there's a few moments where you really see his humanity come through, but most of the time he's a schemer. He's a pathological liar. He's greedy. He's untrustworthy. He, he's a little bit of a sociopath. He just doesn't have the skill or the drive to be successful.
Well, and I don't know if anybody else picked up on this, but this is the way I've always seen the scene in the movie.
Right.
Like, I feel like playing the nice guy Minnesota dude routine, he was getting away with being a slimy fuck for a while, at least.
For a while,
because he not only breaks when Marge is questioning him that second time, he gets angry. Like, he feels like he's entitled to her just believing him on the first time, you know, like, look, lady, I'm cooperating.
Which actually, you know, we usually steer clear of getting too political here, but that makes this movie a little more timely than it might have been. I'll leave it at that. We've got a let's see. As far as the plot, you also get this part where the two break in, kidnap the wife. And there you get a couple of, there were some vague, like the breaking down of the door kind of felt a little bit like The Shining. I think there were a couple of little things there. What's that?
The pink telephone that she drags in.
Pink telephone, yes.
Oh, and when he jerks it away from her, man, that whole scene is like... It's comical and kind of bone chilling, you know, like that whole lead up to it when she's just sitting there in shock. Like, that's really a dude in a ski mask with the crowbar.
Yeah. And she's sitting there watching TV. Yeah, she's watching their TV knitting and smiling, you know, and then she sees this guy. And I always wondered, like, why did you wait till he broke the glass to react?
It's one of those things like she's like, holy shit, this is really happening, you know?
Yeah.
Happens in Fargo, North Carolina. So it's a
North Carolina
act of, oh shit, this is really happening.
Yeah, I think this was it was outside of her wheelhouse.
If I might interject there, if we're talking about Fargo, North Carolina, that would take on a whole other flavor. I mean, because someone's coming to break into your house there to kidnap you. It better be afternoon on Sunday after you've had church and Chick-fil-A.
Especially,
I don't know. I think people hopped up on church and Chick-fil-A might be even more dangerous. I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying that's the proper manners right there. Is you're gonna do that, you better do it after church and Chick-fil-A, because otherwise it just ain't right.
Yeah, well, I guess that's what we're
meanwhile, up there in Minnesota, they're a bit more relaxed about that sort of thing.
Yeah, so you do have this interesting thing where they break in, and she finally runs away, and then the other one comes in through the front door. So, of course, and he grabs her, Gare grabs her, and she bites down hard. Like, she fights back for a bit and bites him hard. And then you have this thing where he just takes the mess and, like, I need ointment, you know.
Yeah.
So they go up to the bathroom, and that's where you get the whole, like, again, she gets in, she locks the door, they break it down with a crowbar, come in, and he immediately goes to the cabinet, and like the jerk he is, he brushes everything aside looking for the ointment, even though he probably could have found it without doing that. Puts it on, looks up, and sees, like,
fun of that though, you know.
He kind of clicks in his brain that she's behind the shower curtain right before. And this was another thing I always thought was nonsensical on her part, that she just comes wailing out of there in the shower curtain, blinding herself with the shower curtain.
Yeah, right.
I love it.
And then he actually just watches the whole thing like it's a show, because it kind of is. And then she trips and falls down the stairs and knocks herself out cold. And then he does that lovely little thing where he's like poking at her to see
yeah.
Hey. And so they catch her, and then things get rough. You know, they're driving down the road at night. Cop pulls them over. Oh, I forgot to put the plates out. It's okay. I'll take care of it. So Buscemi Showalter tries. Well, Showalter is the character. Tries to bribe the cop. You know, as you do. You know, that's
That's
the
$50
smart
bucks
thing.
though. That's insulting.
$50 might have worked for a corrupt cop.
Yeah, put another 50 in there. We'll think
Fargo,
about
North
it.
Carolina. It's out in the middle of nowhere. They might not have known
North Carolina again.
True.
that anything more than a $10 bill, you're rich. You know.
Well, then again, I once one of my brothers once got a speeding ticket for going through the country, and they hit him with a steep fine. And my dad joked that they paid for the entire county's lunch for the day.
Oh yeah,
and so I'm pretty sure this would be similar. Like he was probably hoping for that nice lunch for him and all his friends. So it was kind of,
Well,
it was
let me just say right now, as somebody who might have driven through Brainerd, North Carolina, a few times, that somebody tries to bribe one of our fine police force, they ain't gonna be treated quite so nicely.
right, especially Mayberry, you know.
You know,
Because y'all know that them Minnesota cops, they's all Democrats up there, and we don't take too nicely to
Yankees.
we don't take nicely to that there bribery.
Well, some of them at any rate. But yeah, so what's up, Brandon?
I was just gonna say, you know what this reminds me of? The whole sequence reminds me of that scene in in the Tarantino movie Pulp Fiction, where they're talking and then accidentally the gun goes off.
Yeah, a little bit. Although this one, no accident.
And no
any accident,
saying, "Oh, Daddy."
It still all went to heck in a handbasket. Not the way that Buscemi was hoping it would be.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Buscemi would have at this point been very well known for Reservoir Dogs. That was a interesting little role there. But yeah, we had he tries to rob the cop, and the cop just hands him back the wallet. Put that back in your pocket, sir. Did you step out of the vehicle? And he just gets his deer in headlights look. Gare just reaches over, grabs the cop, pulls out the gun, opens the glove compartment, bam, right in there. Yeah. Buscemi is covered in blood, and he's just like,
"Oh shit!
Oh, daddy!"
Yeah, nice splatter on that fucking headshot right there. I love it. Like that in the wood chipper scene, you could tell these dudes were friends with Randy. You know?
Right.
And then he just tells him, "Go clean it up."
Hey, it's like you did half the work already, bro.
Right. And then of course,
I think as the kids like to say, "Oh, that escalated quickly."
Very quickly. And yes, and I have to admit, like y'all know that I'm not the gore fiend that Mo is, and that some of y'all are. But I can do a little bit of blood, and actually a little bit of the ultra violence, especially when it comes out of nowhere, like in this one, it can be very effective. And it's and then
it was some comedy, you know. There's a little bit of a.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like they do that very unsettling thing where he gets out, starts dragging the cop, and then of course you see headlights coming, and then there's that bit of tension where you're kind of like, "Oh, what's going to happen?"
And that music hits, like you know that it's going to go badly.
And and then of course Gare jumps behind the wheel, zips around the car, and gets in a high-speed chase with these two that drove by, who did the stupid car wreck roll where they kind of slowed down to look, which is like, not a good idea. And of course he goes flying after them. They fall off of the road. One car lands upside down. One of them gets out, starts running. Gare just boom knocks him down in the field, gets over to the car and hits the other one. And again, this is more my speed. You see this happening, but you don't necessarily dwell on what happens. It's more you see him fire into the car, and that's But an interesting bit of, again, blurring the lines of fact and fiction. Other than the Coens themselves, one of Minnesota's most famous sons, Prince, was long rumored to be in this movie because of a weird joke they pulled where the guy running through the field they credited him with a weird symbol at the end of the film. And this was the time when Prince was going by a weird symbol.
Yeah, the artist formerly known as
exactly
Strange Times.
And from what I understand, I don't think Prince did much to disabuse people of that idea.
He's weird. He's weird enough. He would be probably getting chuckles out of it as well.
I think he did, from what I hear.
In his lifetime, Prince liked to do that sort of thing.
Right. And I think it was like actually like their storyboard artist. That's what it was. Their storyboard artist was actually the guy running through the field. But they pulled that weird little joke, and I always thought that was kind of amusing too.
I like the whole build up to it too, man. It's got like a dreamlike quality to it as he's like in pursuit of them. And I've seen shots. It's been bugging me all day because there's like a vampire movie that has almost exactly the same scene in it. And now I really got to track it down because it's definitely post Fargo. So it makes me wonder because it's like the same thing. It does that same way that it's shot, and then the car like kind of just disappears, but then it turns out that it's rolled over. It's like the same sequence, you know.
I wonder if I saw that.
And it's kind of how they begin the series of Fargo. With that, except they change who it is running into the woods. They started off with that sequence, and it's kind of chilling. So
kind of cool. Another cool thing about that sequence that Deakins talked about in the commentary is that they basically used the head and taillights from the cars as their lighting. They only used a little bit more as necessary, but they really wanted the focus to be on like natural lighting. So in a sense, it makes it more chilling because you can't see past the headlights. So it's like blackness all around. And I thought that was
adds to that dream state feeling of it, of being like, you know, nothing's real outside of this point, you know, area of vision kind of a thing.
And then you get to the next day where you get a totally different scene. You open, I think, with a shot of a duck. And you see or a painting of a duck, rather, and that really gorgeous theme coming back with the more, I guess you could say, almost the romantic theme part of the score, if you will. And then that is where you're introduced to Marge and Norm Gunderson, Frances McDormand and John Carroll Lynch. And, you know, she's woken up early in the morning by the call about the triple homicide. And which, you know, you get so many of those in that little area, you know, she must be so used to that. And she gets up and Norm gets up and, you know, he starts going, you know, I'll fix you some eggs. You know, he keeps saying that over and over. And then you get up and you get the very definite reveal that she is quite pregnant. And it's and one of the cool things about the movie is that is just presented as it's just part of life for her, and they don't dwell on it at all. It's just there. And that's extremely rare for movies. It's very rare for movies, which is kind of cool. But what's it?
I was thinking it is a very natural, you know, just
right,
like anybody at the office that you'd run into who's pregnant.
Right. And another cool thing about this that didn't really occur to me until I think I was watching the commentary interview, but as y'all know by now, and I think Mo cautioned me maybe a week ago that I maybe mentioned this a little too often, but I've been watching a lot of Columbo.
No, you can never mention Columbo enough. I love it.
We're down to one episode left, and then I will have watched all of it. But I have read that McDormand partially, her character was partially inspired by Columbo. And there is one thing that this movie does. I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but it might have been, that it has absolutely in common with almost every one of those episodes. With maybe 4 or 5 exceptions, Columbo never appears until after the murder is committed. You know, sometimes you'll be 20, 30 minutes into an episode before you see him. And then, and they did the same thing here. Marge does not appear until after the murders are committed.
Right. It does feel like the opening to an episode of something like that.
Right.
Like, this is where Fargo becomes Fargo to me, is when Marge
Right.
is like waking up to the phone call. That's
Right.
where the movie really kicks off at that point.
Right. And it is kind of interesting because it is more than almost. They talked about this in the Charlie Rose interview, how this was the closest they had come yet to doing an ensemble film, but Marge was still kind of the lead. Like, she is still the center linchpin of the film, but she does not appear until a half hour into the movie. And some of the other characters like Carl and Jerry get a lot of screen time relative to her. So it is an ensemble film, but it is, you're right. It kind of really does kick into gear when this, she comes on the scene, starts investigating. And that whole investigation was just great.
I love it. The whole vibe of that. Just casual over their morning coffee.
Marge,
right.
What do you want to do next? Well, let's look at the footprints. Okay, yeah.
It's like, for the look of his footprints, he was a big fella.
She figures it out quick. I mean, to her credit, she pieces together the obvious scenario like right away.
She does very quickly, yes. And it's
under fire.
Right. And then, of course, that also brings up one of the, just the pregnancy is a fact of life part of it, where she's like, oh, I think I'm going to barf. Well, that passed. Now I'm hungry.
I always took that as she was using that as an excuse because he really shot that girl in the face that was in the car. Because it was clearly kind of, implied. She looks in there and then
she seems like
any pregnant women out there could probably. I think any pregnant women out there could probably agree with you that one minute you feel like barfing, and the next minute you feel like eating.
Right. And actually another thing I saw pointed out in the commentary that's kind of interesting is that almost every time you see Norm and Marge together, they're either sleeping or eating. Like, pretty much every time you see them together. And
it's adorable. Every bit of it.
They are an adorable couple.
They really are. It's like
brothers, Marge. Yeah.
What's that? Oh, yeah. I like that. You think Dave's open yet? Oh, you don't think he's mixed up in this? No, I'm getting some night crawlers for Norm.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I did.
One thing you find about Midwestern people is that there is kind of a stereotype of them being kind of lumps on a log. And this does kind of fit into that stereotype. And I can tell you from family members that come from Kansas and from Colorado that that stereotype's kind of true.
I think it's just that old-fashioned love, You can tell Norm really loves Marge. The whole eggs, like, insisting she get breakfast thing is, like, one of my favorite parts of the movie. And then that whole shot where he's just sitting there still eating, and she goes out and then comes back in and says she needs a jump or whatever. Right. Like, I love that so much. Go ahead, Brandon. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, one thing that's stuck with me when it comes to just the culture of the area is in that first scene where you see the kidnappers, and he's talking about, Steve Buscemi's character is talking about getting laid, getting bacon. It was like, no, pancakes.
Yes, it's also one of my favorite things.
Pancakes house.
If I was up north, I would want to keep going with pancakes because that's what I think of when I think that far north.
Well, man. And actually, that was something where apparently Stormare went to. He did the take as Pancake House, and the Coens are like, "There's an S there," and he's like, "I thought that was a typo." No, there's an S there. The S makes it. I want Pancakes House.
We don't call them pancakes here. We call them snapjacks. Okay.
Right. Well, there is the Pancake House. I mean, that is, legit chain, if I'm remembering correctly. I mean, that's the.
I keep remembering our trip to to Memphis, and how every other restaurant was a Cracker Barrel.
Oh yeah, you see a lot of those in Tennessee. Oh yeah.
I don't know that pancakes and hookers go that well together. They did seem pretty winded
You just haven't tried
afterwards.
it,
You know,
though.
that is the first time for everything.
I don't
you
know.
I can relate.
Throw some of that there. Throw some of that there maple syrup on them, and you got yourself a real good recipe.
They both go good with whipped cream. Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Well, for kids. So yeah, but actually, yeah, during that investigation scene, Marge does have that. I'd be very surprised if our suspect was from Brainerd. That was right on the money, I'm sure. But yeah, so we've got we get back and forth. We see a little bit more with Jerry actually gets the call from Wade that, I showed it to Stan Grossman. He likes the concept. Come on in and we'll talk about it. So he actually gets the meeting about his proposal, and they're going to move on it, but they want to know what he wants for a finder's fee. And he's like, finder's fee? Well, that's not going to cut it. I need the full amount. And they're like,
I want principal.
I need the principal.
Like, you're saying, what are you saying?
What a fucking idiot. He thought they were just going
to... Yeah, he thought...
It's terrible.
Yeah. It was kind of, apparently he came up with a good concept. It was a good, solid business proposal. But for whatever reason, he thought they were going to just give him the money to do it. And they, thinking more logically, were like, oh, he brought us a business proposal, and it's like, yeah. And that's one of the few scenes where you see Wade actually acknowledge that Jerry's not worthless. But you also see him acknowledge that, well, this guy's
it's a dipshit.
He is a dipshit. Exactly.
So you basically want us to invest, and then you take all the profits. And it's like, well, not like that.
I'll pay you back, Yeah. And it's like they tell him pretty much, we're not a bank. I mean, we'd want like all types of guarantees on this, and this is another area where it seems like, well, Jerry thinks that he's just entitled to certain, because he's like, he tries to tell him that he'll just guarantee I'll pay you back. Like his word's good enough for $700,000. No one's word's good enough for that. It's not how life works.
Here's something interesting. I'm just dropping the fucking accent because I'm getting sick of it. Which it'll come back when it's appropriate, but for right now it's just me as myself. But I don't know why. I just decided to adopt this today. I don't know. But the interesting observation that I wanted to throw in there.
Sure.
So we talked a bit about Marge and her husband, and we talked about William H. Macy, Jerry there. We talked about those two men. And I think this is an interesting kind of crossroads in American history, but also in, you think you could say the history of masculinity and culture and in movies and stuff, because the 90s was kind of a decade where the United States was sort of trying to figure out, okay, the Cold War is over, the economic boom is, either there or it's on the rise or whatever. Things are relatively good for most people, all things considered. It's the new millennium is on their way. It's 90s was kind of like a in-between time in some ways, and sort of like, where's America going? What are we doing? And one of the areas that was kind of getting redefined and is kind of getting redefined in high gear nowadays in a more kind of explicit kind of top-down fashion. But one of it was just the idea of like, what makes a man, what makes a husband. And you've got one person, Jerry, the William H. Macy, who is sort of a, what incels nowadays, what they would call a beta male, or what other people would call a beta male or whatever, which I guess incels wouldn't say that, but like people who are alphas, they would say that about someone like him. And if he weren't married, you know for sure he would probably be an incel. But like, the point being, he's someone that he's kind of more of a beta by his personality and his overall just makeup and everything. He's not a good one because he's not at all, a fair dealer. He's not honest. He's not all these things that we talked about, and yet he feels like he's entitled to to have all these great things. But at the same time, it's like you get the sense that he really does want to be the stable provider, which is of course like kind of the classical archetypical man in the household, all that stuff. He wants to do that, but then his father-in-law, who is that 100%, he won't let him, or doesn't think he's good at it or anything like that. So it's like this is all about him trying and failing to do that. Meanwhile, you have Marge's husband, who we know he paints the ducks there, which the painting is like, there were a lot of obviously famous male painters in history and stuff, but like classically, like writing and painting and that kind of stuff is like culturally it's considered to be more of a feminine thing. Does he have a day job that we know of? Did they ever
He's
say
just
that?
painting mallards, bro.
No,
According
to what I understand, the Coens encouraged Lynch and McDormand to come up with backstories for their characters, and they determined that the two of them had both been on the force, and Marge was simply the better cop. And eventually,
and the other
they
dudes played cops and other stuff too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and eventually they just decided, well, he wants to paint anyway. That's his thing. That's his calling. So I'll be the cop and he'll be the painter, basically.
Yeah. Well, basically, however it was going to manifest. My larger point is that and I know this because I came from a household where the mom had a high-paying job and the dad was a stay-at-home dad, and he homeschooled me and my brother. So I mean, and it was right around that time. So point being that this is a time where you see the first emergence of the non-traditional families emerging, and the soon-to-be family for them because they have the child on the way. But like you've got the husband who is doing a lot of like classically feminine things, like with painting and I'll make you the breakfast, and she's the main breadwinner and all that stuff. And he seemingly is not bent out of shape about it. He's like, this is it, and this is our life. And, and the whole eventual conclusion of the thing is, Norm, we're doing pretty good. And that's really kind of what it is. It's like just the simple life, the straightforward life, not trying to wheel or deal or, try to achieve a life that isn't really meant for them. And they're not really trying to do more than what they're able to achieve. But, it's okay for them. And like, you never hear a lick of complaint from him or anything. Like he's just a good, solid guy. And, it's like, isn't that an interesting contrast? And right around that time when much of American society was kind of changing and in a transitional period nowadays, it's a lot more common nowadays, usually it's the husband and wife who both have to work, or, if there is a, imbalance there, then if the woman is the primary breadwinner, that it's not as much of a weird thing. I mean, it's still fairly uncommon, but it is not as uncommon as it was.
God bless Norm and his mallards for that. That's what I'm saying.
No, I will say one thing about this is also the culture that is put, the culture, the Minnesotan culture. I mean, that's one thing that documentary kind of put forward, so to speak. That niceness that's just kind of inherently thrown in. And it's not necessarily that these people are necessarily legit nice. It's just how they are raised to be. And it makes you wonder if our main criminal mastermind, so to speak, would have actually been as sympathetic if this guy actually was more of a in a different culture where you get to see the personality more than what you're actually
Right.
getting.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of interesting because you get to see kind of some of his stuff is hidden underneath that veneer of cultural niceness.
Right.
Indeed.
Although he doesn't hide it as well as some. Like I've seen it stated that in some ways he and Marge are kind of two sides of a coin because they're both masking their true selves, but she is much more successful at it than he is. But one of the things that she's masking, and again, this is kind of the Columbo reference in a way, is the very, 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 very dogged pursuit of justice. Like once she's on the trail, she will not let go. And she is relentless. She is almost cold blooded in her pursuit of justice, but she's genuinely a good person, which is very different from him. And it also makes it a little easier for her niceness to actually be more legit. I mean, you see cracks in it. You see cracks in it when she's dealing with him and dealing with his crap. And also with that weird scene that with Mike Yanagita that, there's a couple of parts where the veneer slips. Like the like, no, I prefer you sit over there, and then she's immediately back. No, I just don't want to turn my neck, It's just,
one thing it is kind of another so Midwesterners, they kind of have that stereotype of being lumps on a log, but Minnesotans in particular, they have the real tendency to be stereotyped as being really passive aggressive, and it's true. Apparently when my parents were driving around in the Twin Cities areas, apparently the St. Paul drivers were some of the worst because they were way too timid and way too passive aggressive. So it's definitely a thing.
I have to admit, reluctantly, y'all made the Canadian reference earlier. The one time I was in Canada, I kind of felt that way because I felt, when I met them face to face in Canada, it was pleasant all around. There was hardly any hint of unpleasantness, except when they thought I was moving up there. Then it was a little testy.
It's like, all right, you can go now.
But on the road, there were times where I was genuinely concerned. When I was in the car driving, there were times I was genuinely concerned. But I don't know. That may be same, may be different. I don't know. But
I think it's just because so many of the highways are dangerous. None of them give a fuck. Because my aunt drives like she's in the Indy 500 when you're out there, and it's.
I also did feel like the streets in Toronto were narrower than they are here. At least that was my impression. I could have been wrong about that, but I felt like they were narrower. But at any rate, so I kind of skipped ahead a little bit when I was talking about the kidnapping, because the scene with Wade and Stan and Jerry, he comes home and sees the aftermath of, oh, they did it, And then you have that thing of him actually practicing the call to Wade, and that's where you get to see him practicing his craft, if you will. And it's almost funny in a sense. It's just really sad too.
It is, yeah. It's also slimy as hell.
No, slimy as hell, yeah.
I love how he's got it all dialed in, and then it's the receptionist, and he has to dial it back for a minute.
Mr. Gusterson, please. Yeah, it was kind of fun. But then when you see him dealing with Wade and Stan about the kidnapping, that was, again, one of the great moments in the movie. Is one of the moments where probably the one moment more than anything else where A, you see Jerry's humanity, and B, you see what a colossal idiot he is because he did not think it through. And that's the part where after they leave the diner and he's talking to Stan, and Stan's like, well, how's Scotty taking this? And just that look, he's like, oh, geez, Scotty. You realize
Yeah,
at that
totally
moment
forgot
he
about
hadn't
him.
even thought about his son. The whole time he was scheming this, he never thought about Scotty. And that's like the moment where he's like, oh, crap. It's like I thought that was the one genuinely decent reaction he had in the whole movie, but it also showed what a colossal moron he had been. And
Well, and he's a dick about it too, because when he goes and deals with Scotty, he tries to just do that whole nice guy Minnesota bullshit and smooth it over. And his son's clearly distraught and like terrified something's gonna happen to his mom.
Yeah,
and he's just like, well, if Aunt Linda calls, just go ahead and tell your mom's in Florida.
And then that's one of the unfortunate threads at the end of the film is you're left going, wow, this kid's screwed. His mother's dead, his grandfather's dead, his father's a felon, poor kid.
Well, that's the thing, though. I think that, again, this is a man, and I think that he lost his money through just failed business ventures, because a lot of that leads to that potential.
Maybe he invested a lot of money in True Coat.
There you go. But I think that this guy actually does not think as you said, doesn't think things through. I don't think that there was any malicious intent. I really do think that he just figured he would get the money, no harm, no foul, nobody would be hurt. It would just be,
Well, as he tells Carl over the phone, this was supposed to be a no roast stuff type of deal. He honestly thought that was it.
Yeah, I think he really, as they said in Meet the Robinsons, I don't think you thought this through.
No, there's a lot of that in this movie.
Or actually, that line comes to my mind. A movie that I'm seriously thinking about putting forward soon, and I certainly want to. I really want us to cover Wag the Dog, and that was a scene that was a scene Robert De Niro had in that one, dealing with William H. Macy. Actually, he says of Macy he didn't think it through. And I'm like, okay, that's appropriate. But anyway, so we've got basically this stuff is rolling at this point. Stuff is happening. Marge is hot on the trail of the people. You get scenes in the cabin, with the two criminals. You have that fun scene where they let Jeannie loose and she falls in the snow, and they're just laughing at her. And all that kind of stuff.
I would have had her run like headlong into a tree if I shot it, but that's just me. And also, it would have been funny if she did that and then died, and then the rest of the movie was them trying to play like she's still alive, just to add like another layer to the deception of the whole thing.
That would be a little
going there too. I can see the Coens going there.
Well, in the end, her death was pretty anticlimactic. He comes in, looks at her. What happened to her?
Oh, she started streaking,
Yeah. And he just shrugs, he's kind of
he doesn't even stop watching TV. He's just
right.
I love that whole thing.
Having that happen and then just grabbing another woman off the street.
Fuck that! Just Weekend at Bernie's her ass, make it look like she's still alive.
Right. That'd be a fun one to do too, eventually. But so yeah, we had you got the scene in the celebrity room, followed by the scene where Shep beats the living hell out of Carl because
whips him like a dog
with that horrifically overdubbed. That whole scene was totally dubbed.
I love how he kicks the shit out of that random guy that comes to the door too. Like he's just on a roll, so he shit kicks that guy real quick, and then comes back in and just whips
her out with the no clothes. Yeah,
and he looks so pissed on that payphone afterwards, like because you know he's hurting for the rest of the movie, and then it just keeps getting worse.
And here's an interesting thing as well about the structure of the film that, again, I had not picked up on this until I read it. But then when I was watching the commentary, I missed it because Roger Deakins decided to talk at that exact moment. So I missed when Buscemi said this. But as soon as I realized he had said it, I set my stopwatch and timed it. when Buscemi says over the phone, when Showalter says over the phone, in a half hour we'll wrap this up. From that point, the movie is exactly a half hour long.
Oh wow!
So that was kind of an interesting little thing that they did.
Got it.
But yeah.
Here's some food for thought here also.
Mhm.
I don't know if anybody noticed the kind of significance of, or the perhaps just presence of, I don't know how significant it is, but like the presence of really, I don't know if the term is banal, banal, however you pronounce it. Banal.
Right.
But like really banal or banal or just innocuous television watching.
Right.
That like it seems like everybody has on a television that is tuned to like daytime television or to soap operas or to really awful looking commercials and stuff.
Hockey.
And kind of wondering what the deal is with that, because like I want to say
Rural antenna TV, man.
Yeah.
Right.
You got like 5 channels.
I
Right.
want to say it's kind of
Especially in the 80s.
I want to say, oh yeah, because it is set in '87, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
I
I mean,
wanted to say that
yeah.
it was kind of like
Yeah,
a sign of
3.
the times, you know. I wanted to say it was kind of a sign of the times that the, you know, television at that time was still pretty mind-numbing, and that the people that are watching it, they sort of have that glazed look on their faces, and I assume that that's sort of part of the
I don't
kind
know.
of Americana feel of it.
Right.
TV's still
Actually-
mind numbing.
That does remind me of an interesting little thing about this, actually. Again, things that the Coens did that were a little bit different, a little bit odd. They did it at least 2 movies in a row, where they had done Fargo. It came out in 96, but was set in 87, which is, it's unusual to do a period piece for something that's less than 10 years old. And then they repeated it the next time at the bat, where Big Lebowski came out in 98, but it was set in 92. So it's very interesting that they did that twice in a row, like barely a period piece, but still emphatically a period piece.
Yeah, they've done that a couple times where like I'm thinking, or where like they don't make like a humongous stink about it either,
Right.
you know, which is kind of the interesting thing, because it's like it's, on the one hand, it is very clearly set in a specific time, and yet
Right.
the fact that it is set in a specific time doesn't really matter to the overall story. I mean,
Right.
like I'm thinking of like in No Country for Old Men, like they say, you know, do you know what date is on this coin? 1958. It's been traveling 22 years to get here, and now it's here. So it's 1980, and yet you know the fact that it is 1980 really doesn't matter, and it's not shoved in your face at all. It's pretty subtle.
Yeah.
Right.
And the only thing about The Big Lebowski that really dates it is, well, obviously they explicitly say it's in, you know, the story is your story I'm about to unfold took
Well,
place
that sweet
in the early 90s.
briefcase phone he's carrying around.
Yeah,
Well,
but,
well,
like,
that,
when they
but
talk,
also
they talk about the Gulf War, but like it's pretty
the dude completely rips off lines from George Bush, and he does it with such, he doesn't do it as someone who's been sitting on these for years. It's like he heard it on TV last week, and it's an off the cuff remark, you know. So that
will not stand, man.
Exactly.
I mean, but you know what I mean, though. It's like they're like it's there. It's kind of it peppers the dialogue, but it is not like. But it's the pepper. It's not the whole meal, you know.
Right. Well, it's not like their last 3 previous ones were very much period pieces. Miller's Crossing was an old school gangster flick. Barton Fink was set in the early days of Hollywood. Hudsucker Proxy was set in that time period. You know, it was very explicit period pieces.
Well, and True Grit obviously was explicitly a period piece, and it was
and Hail Caesar. There have been a few, definitely.
Well, it was the True Grit was different because the dialogue was lifted from the book, and the book apparently has this very, very specific vernacular that you know.
I need to read that book eventually, but one day. Same thing with No Country, actually.
Yeah. Well, I've seen both versions of True Grit, and I have to say that I was kind of shocked at just how similar they are in terms of like dialogue that I assume is lifted straight from the book, and like scenes that are like almost exactly the same, but like obviously there's different emphasis on different things in certain scenes that are like modified or left out or whatever. But like dialogue wise, I was like, damn, they really did do this justice. They didn't feel the need to rewrite a whole lot. So that just shows you they can do it outside of their own parlance, which is in and of itself very distinct.
Right. So we let's see here. Where did we get up to? We're basically at the drop. Basically, Macy has been very insistent. Jerry has been very, very insistent that I need to handle the drop. They only deal with me. And he's doing this so that he can have the money in his hands so he can determine who gets what. And, but he somehow didn't expect that Wade would not want to trust him with $1 million. I don't know why.
$1 million.
I don't know.
Here's an interesting bit of comparison also. So you've got our quote unquote hero here, our man, our guy trying to be in charge of the drop and all that stuff. Right. He's trying to be the main man, and people around him are snatching it away from him. Whereas like with the dude, for example, like he kind of has greatness thrust upon him in that classical analogy. He doesn't really want to be the guy, but he's kind of being thrust into that role, and then someone else is still telling him he's not doing it right or whatever. So it's like even if you want it or you don't want it, there's gonna be some people out there that are gonna be like, dude, are you fucking this up? And then his father-in-law is essentially saying the same kind of thing. But it's like,
what was it? He says it says I think it was something to the effect of, no offense, Jerry, but I don't want you mucking this up. Basically, it's very, very simple and blunt. Like, I don't, although it is interesting that Wade, for all of his bravado and his take charge nature and whatever, he shows a pretty cold mercenary streak too. He's like, maybe we should just offer them $500,000.
Yeah.
It stands like we're not horse trading, Wade.
That, which again, talk about, like I mentioned before, with the Western analogies there. I mean, that's how much more Western could you get there? Plus, he goes there with his outfit. He's got his revolver there, and it's it's like a kind of a half-ass duel. Obviously,
and what a duel! Yeah. It's basically Carl gets PO'd that someone other than Jerry showed up, and Wade's variance is a no genie, no money, no genie, and Carl just hauls off and shoots him out of just being PO'd, and shoots him in the gut, which he should know is not going to be a permanent
he wanted
solution.
him to die slow.
I think he just didn't even. He wasn't aiming to kill so much as to maim, injure, and what have you. But he somehow, I guess, didn't think this old man would come armed, and that's where you get one of the probably the most gruesome effect in the movie, where Wade shoots him upside the face, just cuts his face open, and that's gotta smart.
It's one of those things that it's like that wouldn't kill you necessarily unless you let yourself.
It would hurt.
It would definitely hurt, and it would probably disfigure you pretty good.
Could be. He's going to have a Glasgow smile if he hadn't had a date with the wood chipper. But
I understand his reaction later on when he gets back. It's understandable. As far as I'm concerned, he took the actual extra risk in that matter. So
here's an interesting thing, though. Again, comparing and contrasting characters and stuff. So we've got William H. Macy, who, as we've established, he's trying to be the big man and he's failing at it miserably.
Right.
But then you've got Steve Buscemi, who he's trying to be the criminal mastermind here, and yet he's kind of an idiot too, because he's working with this powder keg of a right-hand man who ends up fucking the whole thing up because he's trigger happy and he's kind of brain dead and, violent and shoots first, asks questions later, all that stuff. But, he's
Gayer is a total sociopath. I mean, there are no questions about it.
Idea that he was a professional hitman, and Buscemi's character is more of a con man,
Yeah, I mean, that's
probably
my
through
point.
previous
Is that
job.
Buscemi, like, he thinks of himself as like criminal mastermind, but he's not good at negotiation. He's not good at small talk. He's not really good at being intimidating. So I think that's a pretty common theme in a lot of Coen Brothers films, is that everybody's kind of an idiot and everybody thinks that they're a lot more competent than they really are. And
actually, one commentary on what Mo just said. Actually, a book that I just recently finished reading was the John Grisham book Camino Wins, and he actually goes into hitmen on that one. He talks about hitmen. And I don't know if this could be taken for gospel, but Grisham does a lot of research with his books. But he actually has people talking in the book about how rare hitmen are and how most hitmen are not professionals. They're actually fairly inept at being hitmen. They're hired for a job, and if they try to do another one, they'll get caught. And that's certainly what happened. And I think Yair definitely falls into that category. Like, he probably thinks of himself as a hitman, but he doesn't strike me as a professional by any stretch of the imagination.
Neither one of them strikes me as a professional.
Right.
He wants to be Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman. And thank God that people like Richard Kuklinski are very, very rare, because he was like a true psychopath and, truly had
he's mostly full of shit. Like, if
he also apparently saw himself as a Marlboro Man, or at least that one person said so. Maybe I thought of that because he smoked a lot of Marlboros, like a subconscious thing.
It's important to note that Marge never would have caught him with the wood chipper if Buscemi hadn't been running his fucking mouth at the bar.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have caught him with the wood chipper if the guy hadn't decided to be a psycho about it. But again, that goes back in just to dwell on the psychiatric elements of these individuals. We talk about thought process. Of course, Buscemi partnered himself up with somebody who was very concrete. His thought process. It was matter of fact. There was no gray area. There was no, yes, you were shot in the face. Okay, yeah, you can take the car. No, this is how it works.
Split that.
This is how it is. Okay, you're going to run out on my deal. I kill you. That's what... Because if he had that ability to reason more in an abstract manner and understands, like, yeah, this dude's gotten some damage, let him take the car, I'll take my money. Steve Buscemi would have been off with the car. By the time she got there would have been no car for her to spot.
Well, and there's also another
there with the wood chipper.
And there's another important aspect too, and this is often a recurring theme of the Coens, but this was the same thing that sunk Jerry, sunk Carl. If he wasn't so damn greedy. Like, we kind of skipped that wonderful scene of him sitting in the car looking at the satchel and going, whoa. Just like he couldn't believe how much money was in there. And he's sitting there cursing Jerry like he freaking lied to us. But on the other hand, he's going, you could tell he's going, what a windfall. And he's going, and he doesn't know. So if he hadn't been so greedy, he could have easily paid half of the car, walked away, and been still rich as can be. But he had to be greedy and go, no, I did all the work. You get your 40 grand. Be happy with it. And actually, he was offering him 40. He was offering him double what the guy was hired to get.
Plus
so
a truck.
What's that? What's
Plus
that?
A truck. He was going to give him his truck.
He was going to give him his truck, yes. So the way he saw both of them, you're right, Brandon. Like if either of them had done a little more creative thinking, I think they could have communicated better. But I do think that Buscemi was absolutely logical in his thought process, but he was foolish in thinking, well, I should keep all this for myself and be a hard ass on this subject. Even though this guy's dangerous, and I know he's dangerous, he still played with fire, and, well, it didn't work out so well for him, did it? Well, what was it they said? That one guy said it didn't sound like such a good deal for him, I think it was. But, but again, that one scene with the satchel, of course, that was what set up the whole urban legend that sets up Kumiko, because he goes and buries that satchel in a snowbank on a long stretch of highway next to a long stretch of fence with no real landmarks. I love how he uses that little windshield ice thing as a landmark, like you're going to see that, or burying it in the snow and expecting it to, I guess he figured it would stay covered until he was able to come back and recover it. Theoretically that would have made sense, but in any
case, it made it real easy to recreate needlepoint.
It did,
so,
yes.
There's that.
But and actually, it would have been. Apparently, they had to find 6 spots before they found enough snow to actually make that scene work.
What the hell? How did they not just shovel some over from the other side of the road?
Well, the weird thing, Fargo was supposedly filmed, I think it was like the second warmest winter on record in that area. They actually had trouble finding snow. They had to create snow for much of the film. Which
certainly would have been a problem this year.
I know, but it's not something you expect from Minnesota.
No, yeah, not at all. That blows my mind more than any other tidbit we've shared. Like, what the hell? They needed to find snow for that?
Yes.
Wow.
But anyway, actually, one thing Deacon said was the scene with Jerry and Wade and Stan in Wade's office. They were filming that when a legit blizzard touched down. And Deacon sent his second unit crew out to get that opening shot of the car coming down the highway.
Nice, yeah.
That was filmed. That was a second unit crew filming that scene because they were all busy filming another scene across, the state. And that was the only real blizzard they had during the whole film.
That's wild. Yeah, that's interesting.
But as part of the reason, I guess, why that scene was as effective as it was too, was the actual, legit snowfall and whatever. But and also it kind of blew their idea because they were up high in the building because they wanted to see all the snow-covered countryside, but enough snow was coming down that you can see it through the window, but not clearly. So it's like, that's unfortunate. If they had a higher budget, they could have done more. But that's what you do. They blew the wad on Hudsucker, so they did this one on a very low budget. So it was interesting what they were able to make happen.
It worked out. All they needed to do is rent that wood chipper.
Yes. And so we have the wood chipper. Well, first of all, Gare comes running out the cottage, putting on his clothes still, basically, with an axe.
I think he's just got the winter hat on and his long johns, and he comes out and he's got that axe, and he just fucking ends him right there,
And then Marge is coming back from her work in the Twin Cities, and she decides to go out by that lake. You had that wonderful scene earlier that we didn't really talk about the state trooper goes out to talk to this random guy who's like a bartender.
I love it.
Yeah, that's a fun little scene.
They're looking up at the weather and stuff. Yep. Like The way that guy tells that story, I wanted to touch on this very briefly because you guys have brought up the Canadian connection, which, dude, these people over here are just diet Canadians is what they are. And they're Canadians with more gun rights is basically what's going on. You know, I've heard so many stories because I grew up there before we moved down here.
Right.
I've heard so many stories told in exactly that same, like, super concise, not overly explaining it, you know, but at the same time, it for some reason is engaging because of the way the dude is telling it, you know. And then I've seen several of those stories immediately transition into weather talk, you know. But yeah, I love that part where he's like, she told me to call it in, so I called it in. End of story. Like that's that's it, you know. How about that weather, eh? You know,
I could definitely speak to the authenticity factor.
Good times, yeah. That's one of my favorite scenes in the movie for sure.
Well, and not only that, like that's very true to life.
That's all I really had on it. It's just I've heard a lot of conversations like that, you know.
Well, it's very true to life as well as the accent's true to life, and then kind of similar region of the country, but more in the middle. Like if anybody ever saw Nebraska, the Alexander Payne film,
that's a good one.
We should talk about that at some point. But like that's a film that because I lived in St. Paul, and then I also my dad's side of the family is from Kansas, and kind of similar. Like that movie captures that like true like middle of the Midwest, not like northern Midwest like Minnesota, but like central Midwest kind of, not just vernacular, but like the subject matters of like how many miles did you get, you know, traveling so and so, things like that. And also like here with the weather and with the gonna be cold tonight, you know, fronts coming in, you know, just like the focus on the weather and sort of mundane things, like that's 100% accurate to both regions, but it's just got a different flavor because like in some place like Nebraska or Kansas or whatever, the whole topic of conversation is how far can you get, you know, because like in that part of the country, it's like that's all you got is just wide open spaces versus like Minnesota where obviously it's cold. And so, you know, but to them, you know, that it's like their present circumstances isn't all that cold versus like, oh, there's a front coming in.
Right. And it's also very amusing because you got the two of them are like bundled up, totally bundled up. Oh, it's about to get cold. And it's like, it's clear that different people in different parts of the country have a different definition of cold. Because when I'm bundled up like that, I think it's cold. But
well, and then you talk about like, you know, people from Texas or whatever, which Texas is kind of a weird state because it exists different depending on the part of Texas. It's like it's part South, part Midwest, and then part Southwest. You know, but like you talk pretty much, yeah. But like, you know, if you or northern Mexico,
exactly.
Like, you know, but point being, any part of Texas that you're in, you talk to someone from Texas, and anything that's like, you know, below 70 degrees is cold, and they're freezing
outside of North Plains. But that's
I was gonna say the point. That's a little different there, but and but at any rate, and hopefully things are starting to straighten out for all those folks right now. Guys. Yeah. But
we know that we don't have any Texas people listening because they don't have power.
It's true, except the ones that I know that have inverters hooked up to Nintendo 64s right now. Those Texas folk are resilient, man. A lot of them are in the gaming groups.
So at any rate, operating on the tip,
they're used to hurricane season, so this sucks. Man.
Right. So operating on the tip from that guy, Marge drives out by the lake, does a little pass around. Oh, there's my car. 10 Sierra. So she gets out, you know, suddenly gets out, goes walking, and then she comes across a sight that I don't think she ever thought she would come across. This guy next to a wood chipper, fountain of red spewing out from it. And all you see left of Carl is his foot sticking out.
Which
it's
I saw that movie on TV when I was like middle school aged or something, and they didn't censor that part or anything.
Wow.
Which, I mean, to be fair, it's kind of cartoony looking anyway, and it's not even all that. It's also not even all that graphic, to be honest. But
it's
like
more the thought behind it.
yeah, exactly. But I saw that on cable, like, and it was not even like TCM; it was like AMC or something. So it had commercials and everything. But like, that always stuck with me, as it did for everybody. But the part that I thought was hilarious was in that scene where she's like, "Stop, police!" and she points at her hat.
Right. Because he couldn't hear her.
That cracked me up.
And then he takes off running. And I had never noticed this before, but it was pointed out in, I think, one of the documentaries. And when I was watching the commentary track, I noticed it. I don't know if y'all noticed, when he falls down, the boots still have the price scrawled on the bottom. And so it's like $9.99 or something like that. And it's just kind of a hilarious touch. I don't know why. It just amused me. But but anyway, so then, of course, she's taking him back in the squad car and just kind of sort of passive-aggressively lecturing him, if you will. But also she's just showing her puzzlement. And it's very similar to Tommy Lee Jones at the end of No Country for Old Men, just kind of ruminating on what a strange world it is and kind of what, you did all this for a little bit of money, and that's...
It's funny you mentioned that because this does have a lot in common with No Country for Old Men, even though the novel No Country for Old Men was not theirs, but it has a lot in common. So you got people in a not great financial situation trying to have a better life than they otherwise might have by taking money or attempting to take money that doesn't belong to them, being pursued by various bad people, including a killer who is not the most vocal and who's got very clear sociopathic tendencies. And a law enforcement person who's just baffled by the insanity of it all, trying to make sense of it all, can't really do it, and is just content to live kind of a normal little life. Except that with Fargo, you have, it's a female doing it and also pregnant at that, but also that the ultimate conclusion is that, that there is hope for the future and that all things considered, they're doing pretty good, even though they themselves are not necessarily in the best financial situation. And they're not in the worst either. They're just kind of ordinary people. But that's totally different from, say, Tommy Lee Jones, who he realizes that he outlived his father on the force, that he's now older than his father was when he was a police officer, and that, things are just as mixed up, if not more so than they were in his time. So and he's also much older and more like he's past the age of being a father or having a lot of hope for the future. It's more of a bleak ending and more of a bleak assessment of human nature. Plus, in that one, the sociopathic bad guy, he gets away with it. He wins ultimately. Or rather,
he gets run over by a car, but then he staggers off, and he essentially gets away.
Maybe win is too strong a word, but he doesn't outright
fucking helmet cut, man. It made him invincible.
He doesn't outright lose, is my point.
Right, exactly. Well, this one, of course. What's that?
I was saying we're kind of getting closer to
well, I was trying to wrap up the plot real quick. He kind of skipped to the end real quick, but you do have that nice callback to the beginning with all the cop cars showing up with the score playing again. And then you have our little cops moment where we have the one time in the film you have handheld camera where the cops bust into the hotel room to catch Jerry as he's trying to crawl out the bathroom window.
His shrieks. Oh, man.
Yeah.
I live for that part of the movie.
And then you do have that nice little touching scene at the end between Marge and Norm, and their final lines, just 2 more months. And that's kind of very much. What's that?
That 3-cent stamp.
The 3-cent stamp. Yes. You hear all about his small achievement. And she does a great job of bucking him up, you know. Of course they do. Every time they raise the postage, people need the 3 cent, you know. It's like,
Oh yeah, that's before forever stamps. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But so that pretty much wraps up the plot. And as Brandon said, we're just over 2 hours, so we should kind of let's do a quick rundown though of the production. We've talked as we go along with a lot of the production notes, but overall, I know I've gushed about the music, but what's y'all's take overall on the music, the overall production, like camera work and whatnot with this one?
Well, it works together perfectly, man. I mean, it wouldn't be at all the same movie if any of that was different, you know.
And you can't really talk Coen Brothers production without talking about the language. Their wordcraft is what sets them apart from most. It's much like a Wes Anderson film. If you listen to a Coen Brothers film, you know it's a Coen Brothers film.
Exactly.
If you listen to a Wes Anderson film, you know it's a Wes Anderson film. That's just how it is.
Well, it's interesting because it's different. Also, the Wes Anderson comparison is a good one because that was also the decade of the Tarantinos and the Kevin Smiths coming along, where they were wordsmiths of a different sort. Also very distinct, but also more monologue-ish, more monologue oriented and more okay with kind of longer extended passages of dialogue, whereas the Coens, like, they have a very, very distinct speech style, and yet it's not really in that kind of monologue-ish kind of structure, and it can adjust relative to the time period and to the characters and all that stuff.
One thing with the Coens, and I talked earlier about their experience with Nicolas Cage, they have a tendency to cast specifically to the role, or to even write roles specifically to an actor, and they will write down to the pause in the word all of Jerry's hemming and hawing and double back speech and stuttering was scripted, supposedly. Almost none of it was improvised. Apparently, William H. Macy added a couple of things. Like, they said that originally the Sierra was supposed to be blue, but he really wanted to say burnt umber. So they let him do that.
That's priceless.
But they will script down to the punctuation exactly. Like I said before, Stomar said, I think there's a typo. No, we want you to say Pancake's house. They're very meticulous with their screenplays. Deakins claimed that almost nothing in the screenplay did not end up on screen. He said there was one sequence in Barton Fink that they scrapped because it didn't look right. But he said that was like in those 3 movies, that and Hudsucker and Fargo, it was like the only scene they scrapped from the screenplay. So they're really, really, really particular. But on the other hand, the documentary, everyone was talking about how laid back they are on set and everything like that. So it's a weird blend. But it's like they know what they want, but they also apparently know how to get what they want, which is
right. When you got it that dialed in, you can like work more with people. You can be laid back and just kind of help them get to where you want them to go. I think.
Well, and isn't that kind of the goal of life, is to learn how to get what you want in a way that doesn't make you an asshole,
Right.
And I think Kevin Smith, like, especially in his earlier scripts, was very like text oriented, and was, again, not being an asshole about it, but was like very particular with each line kind of having a specific rhythm to it, like to the point where you were like, why didn't he just go into playwriting? Because he would have made a good playwright.
I don't get that vibe from some of his more recent ones. Like James Silent Bob Reboot was a lot more freewheeling than that. But
that's some of the early ones. I mean, like, especially like as he went along, I think he he realized, oh, wait a minute, other people can bring good ideas to the table.
Well, and another one that I often would bring up in this conversation is Woody Allen. Woody Allen was a playwright. He did several plays, and some of those were adapted into films. Yeah, Don't Drink the Water being a good example. But yeah, so there's a few good ones there. But do we want to do some individual favorites, or just do a generalized favorites bit for this?
Do individual favorite scenes. Okay. I mean, that should be a good.
Well, I mean, like favorite character versus scene versus, or just do like generally, this is your favorite bit. We'll go ahead and Brandon, we'll let you lead off, and you can set the template. How about that?
Well, wood chipper would be close to it, but just because it's wood chipper, you can't discount wood chipper.
Exactly.
But I do like the whole rundown of the pancakes house scene. I just like the conversation between the two. It's just in general fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I can vouch maybe that in that position, especially going into cold weather, I'd probably choose pancakes over hookers. I'm not opposed to your guys' idea of mixing them.
Or both. Pancake hookers.
I feel like I'm going to get sluggish part of the way through that, and it's just going to be a waste of the money on the hooker, and she's going to end up watching The Tonight Show with me. But
why not
if ever I find the opportunity.
Well, that's
hooker. You have yourself a nice big stack of pancakes and get your energy up. And
I've thought about hiring a hooker to play Mario Kart with me before. I always thought that would be hilarious. Like, you just hire her to come by, and it's like, I ordered a 15-inch party sub or whatever. Let's play some Mario Kart and have a couple of beers. No sex required.
Which, that would actually be kind of an amusing, like, legal charity. That'd be an amusing kind of legal question, because it's like technically you're hiring a prostitute, but you're not hiring her for sex. You're hiring her for something that's totally legal. So does that count as soliciting or what?
And also it depends on the state that you're in. But I would think right now with COVID, that'd be actually a nice gesture. But anyway,
they're out of work.
From the aspect of a foodie.
What's that?
If you're coming from the aspect of a foodie, food can be very sexual in nature.
Not for me, but let's put it this way. I'll hire her to come play Mario Kart with me, and she can bring the pancakes.
Which I still got to use up my. I still got to use up the maple syrup I have in the fridge.
Is food porn.
This idea is a good excuse, Dan. Go out there, contribute to the community.
Yeah,
sorry, Brandon. I didn't mean to jump on you there.
I mean, they call them bum cakes for a reason. So why not put some maple syrup on there?
Right. Well, anyway, how about you, Dave? What are your favorites?
My whole favorite scene is when Marge gets woken up. The breakfast scene, getting to the whole scene of the crime, and she's like, "Oh, big fella, and then the whole conversation between her and her deputy dude that cracks me up. And even seeing it the one time, I mean that the whole scenario, and then her conversation with her husband Norm is really sweet in the end. And I don't know, like I kind of like the off sense of humor throughout the whole thing. I mean, it just kind of it kind of spins really well, I mean, it's a comedy, as Dane said, a comedy of errors, where a dude is not happy with his life, decides to try to get his life back into the swing of things by trying to get a little dough, and it kind of goes awry, and things don't go his way. So
Well, that's the human story, isn't it? We're all trying to better ourselves, and it's just a matter of, do we want to do it legitimately, or do we want to take the quick and easy way and then become an agent of evil?
And being that I've seen some of the series, they use this as a premise, but from there on in, it's like a wild ride out. So, I mean, to have Bad Santa kind of come in to town like the Man in Black, and then Bilbo Baggins come barreling through as the salesman. Yeah,
Old North still trying to get adopted. I remember that movie.
Oh yeah,
it's interesting because it uses premises of the film, and Billy Bob Thornton like plays this badass like drifter that's kind of a murderer, but he's kind of like your jack of all trades, and he's more of a psychological dude because he can get people to do things just by saying something to them, you know. And it's interesting because they're in the movie. There are characters that talk to what was it? Talk to the car salesman and talk to him about his bully, like being bullied.
Oh god, that dude that fucking freaks out on him. We skimmed totally over that part where he when he swears finally during that whole rant at him over that fucking sealant.
Yeah.
Sorry,
although
Dave,
actually one part that we did skip over is I'll go talk to my boss. He peeks his head in his room. He just has a couple lines of dialogue about the game, and then he goes back, and it's like,
yeah,
that really
right
fucked his
I can only knock 100 off of that.
Right.
Sorry. You are a liar.
I like the fact that
fucking liar.
He doesn't even really talk to his boss.
No.
And when he does, though, he's still a lame-o. He's still a guy that's not thought of because he doesn't have an extra ticket for the game. He's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, what about you, Dane? What's your favorites?
Oh, boy. Trying to. Well, I mean, Wood Chipper takes it as far as a set piece. I think in terms of a line of dialogue, I mean, a lot of the ones my family would always quote, like, he's fleeing the interview, as well as, like, you know, it was funny looking. In what kind of way? Oh, just in a general kind of way. And, you know, like that. And, like, I'm going to barf and, you know, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's so hard to choose, like, just one. I mean, I think a lot of just the dialogue itself is just so funny insofar that it feels so true to the region if you are familiar with it. But again, just as far as like a tiny moment that always stuck out to me was just the police, and she points at her hat. Just the way she does it is just so quintessentially Marge Gunderson, and so it just reeks of the character and of the place and everything, because that's just someone that's like doing the right thing and is, you know, in the face of someone that's by all accounts should wipe the floor with her, and yet, you know, she gets one over on him. And she, you know, again, she's just a simple person from a simple place, not very unassuming, and pregnant to boot. So it's like, you know, anybody that's trying to write a you know, because we're obviously very big on female protagonists now and everything, and it's kind of being approached from a very kind of top-down, corporatized kind of level. But I'm like, you know, if you guys want a lesson in how to write a good female protagonist, you do the obvious
Marge,
ones.
son of a Gunderson, right?
Yeah, like her, Clarice Starling, you know, Ripley from Aliens, if you want to get prior to the 90s. But like, you know, especially those two, I'm like, those two kind of laid the groundwork, because they're, you know, relatively unassuming people, especially Marge Gunderson, you know, just a normal person who's able, and a pregnant woman at that, who's able to do, you know, this great bit of policing, and is, you know, very good at what she does without having to be like cocky about it or trying to be, you know, she just, everybody can learn a lesson from that as far as crafting that kind of character.
Or like
Yeah,
one
it's
lesson
great,
that she gives in the movie that we didn't mention specifically, but I always really liked was the part where she's talking to that officer Lou after the that first little homicide that she's looking at, and she's like, he wrote down in his citation last license plate he wrote in his citation book was DLR. I figure they interrupted him or something before he could finish, and she just kind of looks at him and is like, I'm not sure I agree with your policing there, Lou. I think those were dealer tags. And he's like, oh.
So play.
I actually
Love
think
it.
of her as a great version of the female protagonist, because currently a female protagonist has to be perfect at and the best at everything and from the beginning of the film, but this person actually feels like a real individual.
Right.
And that's I think that's something that they could learn from these days.
Yeah, I mean, like, she kind of messes up on not dialing right in on friggin' Larry's sketchy ass right away. But I think she just figures he's a skittish little dude or something, you know? It kind of dawns on her later to come back and really press him about the cars, but he was forging numbers right there on his desk, you know?
Right.
Like, she totally overlooked that.
Mo, did you tell us what your favorites were?
I have not. I don't know. Everything with Marge is great. The wood chipper obviously is awesome. That creepy shit with that Mike guy is a scene that always stands out to me. But I think my favorite stuff in the movie anymore is just Norm and Marge. Norm's like my favorite character of the movie anymore, I think. Even though he's such a sort of almost like a prop, you know. He's not much of a character that has much involvement in the story. I just find the stuff with him so adorable through the movie. You know? Right. Like, my favorite scene is where friggin' they're in bed and she's like watching that dung beetle documentary and she's just like, Norm, I think I'm gonna turn in, and he wakes up and he's like, what? And he just like watches the TV for a second, you know, like that's just the whole scene, but it's one of my favorites.
Like, okay.
That's kind of, you know, that's what I mean. Like, the TV that everybody watches in the movie is so unbelievably mundane, whether it's a soap opera or a documentary or whatever game show they were watching. After sex, of all things, it's like you could probably do a whole like video about that as like a subtext of like it's kind of the opposite of like Clockwork Orange, how like there it was, you know, things, the colors of real life only seem really real when you video them on a screen. That's what Alex was thinking. But there, it's almost like in Fargo, it's like, you've got real life, real visceral stuff happening, whether it's violence or whether it's sex or whatever, and yet everybody wants to go to this safe, mundane kind of brain-numbing television. I'm like, there's got to be something more you could talk about there. Right.
So, Forrest, what are your favorites on this?
Definitely the wood chipper scene. That's pretty hard to forget.
Right.
And Marge, she's just such a great character, very smart, very likable. It's kind of all I can think of at the moment.
All right, and then for me, I got to admit, there's so many moments in this film that I'd be hard to pick a favorite. Strangely enough, a lot of the depictions of violence are high on my list with this one because they're so well done. The chipper, the part where Wade and Carl get at it with each other. You know, the scene with the three on the highway. I mean, that whole scene really is just a great scene overall. But also like the little moments, like again when Jerry finally realizes what he's going to be doing to his son. That little moment. There are little moments like that here and there, but and I agree, Norm is just absolutely adorable. Everything that he's in is great.
Hound, man, I love him.
And and especially again, just the music. The music is I just love this score. I love it absolutely. But anyway, so we went a little longer, but it's an awesome movie. So hopefully y'all are happy with the ride.
I've certainly enjoyed it.
We got a pretty good showing here. Dane, I'm sorry you had so many technical issues early on, but you got them smoothed out, so that's good.
Got them all worked out for you.
All right.
Gentlemen.
I guess if we're going, this is going to be the main show then? Is that how we figured that out? And then we'll do the... So do we want to go ahead and do a little setup? To Brandon, did you want to do a setup for next month with what's going on?
Well, I guess so. Next month is going to be a comic book related month. It's going to be a non-superhero comic book related month. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pull up my list here. I'm going to start from the back and go to the recent, so that we'll hit next week's. Of course, we're ending it with on the 30th of March with Judge Dredd as our pre-show. Dave is making sure we get that in with Forrest's submission of Dredd, the remake of that. Mm-hmm. Then on the 21st, we're going to hit Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight.
Yes.
By Dustin. And of course, the great film Ghost World, which I submitted, but Jake's going to be doing the coverage of that. Then, of course, on the 16th, another film I submitted, but also Dave is behind there as well, is Popeye, the Robin Williams film, with Snowpiercer as the main show, with Dave in the lead. Then on the 9th, we have another submission of mine, Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yes.
And From Hell with Dave as the lead on it. And then finally, next week, Jake is going to lead us off again with the pre-show Road to Perdition. And Forrest is going to follow it up with Dick Tracy.
Yeah. Nice. We got good stuff.
Yeah, I was so glad I proposed the category because it proved to be fruitful, and just for reference to everybody, these are non-superhero Western comics, so kind of in the Western world, not counting manga or Korean comics or things like that, because those kind of follow a different cultural tradition. They follow a different way in which the comics are read and published and absorbed and all that stuff. Comics,
and there will be plenty of room for a full month for those, hopefully later on.
That's the other reason, was because I was like, they're comics, but it's like they're the medium in which it's presented and absorbed and the cultural context and all that. It's a lot different from the West, and so therefore it needs to be given its own time to shine. So that's why when I formulated that, I was like, those need to get their own time to shine, I think. It wouldn't be right to try to compare those necessarily. And the art forms, despite being in comics, sequential art and everything, those are all, they're meant to be absorbed differently and read, right to left as opposed to left to right, at least manga. And even though like you get like French language comics and stuff, like, yeah, it's French, but like the conventions are not as dissimilar as they would be for Japanese or Korean comics.
Well, this we are going to be going into a discussion on. Jake, why don't I will let Jake tell us once we go live. So stay tuned for another exciting discussion tonight.
Yeah.
So say good night, ladies and gentlemen, and
good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, you betcha.